Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Within the silence of her room, Elowyn's fingers danced across the pleats of her new attire, breathing life into the cloth with each caress. She had always felt a unique affinity for fabric, and this garment was no exception. It seemed to mold to her curves perfectly. Today marked a significant milestone in Elowyn's life, a day she had eagerly awaited. As she caught her reflection in the mirror, Elowyn paused, captivated by the picture of satisfaction gazing back at her. The blouse, an exquisite creation with its flowing contours, complemented the lady it adorned, and Elowyn knew it was more than just clothing. It was an embodiment of her essence. "A perfect match," she whispered, the moment heavy with anticipation and fulfillment. With that, Elowyn grabbed her things and embarked on this new chapter with a newfound serenity. The familiar bag and keys felt like extensions of her newfound freedom and joy. It was time to face the world as her authentic self. The drive to her flower shop felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Each stoplight gave her a moment to second-guess her decision, but she pressed on, determined to embrace this new chapter in her life. As she pulled into her usual parking spot behind the quaint storefront, Elowyn's heart raced. The familiar sight of her beloved flower shop, blooming whispers, brought a sense of comfort. This place had been her sanctuary for years, a haven where she could express her creativity and nurture beauty. Now, it would bear witness to her own blossoming. Taking one last deep breath, Elowyn stepped out of her car and walked towards the shop's entrance. The jingling of keys in her hand seemed louder than usual as she unlocked the door. The sweet fragrance of flowers enveloped her as she stepped inside, bringing a smile to her face despite her nerves. As Elowyn busied herself with the morning routine, watering plants, arranging displays, and preparing for the day's orders, she felt a sense of normalcy wash over her. The familiar tasks grounded her, reminding her that beneath the surface, she was still the same person who had poured her heart and soul into this business. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down the minutes until opening time. Elowyn's gaze kept darting to the front door, anticipating the first customer of the day. Would they notice the change? Would they say anything? The bell above the door chimed, announcing the arrival of Mrs. Holloway, one of Elowyn's most loyal customers. The elderly woman hobbled in, her cane tapping against the hardwood floor. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Holloway called out cheerfully. "I'm here for my weekly bouquet." Elowyn stepped out from behind a large fern, her heart pounding. "Good morning, Mrs. Holloway. I have just the arrangement for you today." Mrs. Holloway's eyes widened slightly as she took in Elowyn's appearance, but her warm smile never faltered. "My, don't you look lovely today? That blouse suits you wonderfully." A wave of relief washed over Elowyn. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I'm glad you like it." As Elowyn carefully selected flowers for Mrs. Holloway's bouquet, the older woman chatted about her grandchildren and her garden. The normalcy of their interaction, coupled with the simple acceptance of her appearance, filled Elowyn with a growing sense of confidence. Throughout the day, more regular customers filtered in and out of the shop. Some offered compliments on Elowyn's new look, while others simply carried on as usual. Each positive interaction, each smile, each moment of normalcy chipped away at the fear that had gripped Elowyn's heart for so long. As the afternoon sun streamed through the shop windows, casting a warm glow on the colorful blooms, Elowyn found herself humming softly. The tension in her shoulders had eased, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The bell chimed again, and Elowyn looked up to see her friend and fellow small business owner, Marina, entering the shop. Marina ran the bakery 2 doors down, and they often traded flowers for pastries. "Hey there, Elle!" Marina called out, using the nickname she'd given Elowyn years ago. "I brought you some of those lemon tarts you love so much." Elowyn emerged from behind the counter, suddenly aware again of her blouse and the changes it represented. Marina paused for a moment, taking in Elowyn's appearance, then broke into a wide grin. "Well, look at you! That blouse is gorgeous! It really brings out the color in your eyes." Elowyn felt a lump form in her throat, overwhelmed by her friend's immediate acceptance. "Thanks, Marina. It's been a big day." Marina set the box of tarts on the counter and pulled Elowyn into a warm hug.
"I'm proud of you, Elle. You look happy."
As they parted, Elowyn wiped away a stray tear.
"I am happy. Scared, but happy."
Marina squeezed her hand. "You've got this. And you know I'm here if you need anything, right?" Elowyn nodded, grateful for the unwavering support of her friend. They chatted for a while longer, sharing tarts and catching up on neighborhood gossip. When Marina left, promising to return the next day for her usual flower order, Elowyn felt a renewed sense of belonging in her community. As closing time approached, Elowyn began the process of tidying up the shop. She misted the plants, swept the floors, and updated the books. Each task felt different somehow, infused with a new energy. She caught glimpses of herself in the reflective surfaces of vases and mirrors, still marveling at how right she felt in her own skin. Just as she was about to lock up, the bell chimed one last time. Elowyn turned to see Mr. Garrett, the gruff owner of the hardware store across the street. Her breath caught in her throat. Mr. Garrett had always been polite, but distant, and she wasn't sure how he would react to her change.
"Evening,"
Mr. Garrett mumbled, his eyes darting around the shop.
"The missus sent me for some flowers. It's our anniversary."
Elowyn straightened her shoulders, determined to handle this interaction with grace.
"Of course, Mr. Garrett. Did you have anything specific in mind?"
As she helped him choose a beautiful arrangement of roses and lilies, Elowyn braced herself for any potential comments or reactions, but Mr. Garrett simply grunted his approval of the bouquet and reached for his wallet. As Elowyn rang up the purchase, Mr. Garrett cleared his throat awkwardly. You look nice today. The wife's always saying I should notice these things more." A smile tugged at Elowyn's lips. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett. I hope Mrs. Garrett loves the flowers. Happy anniversary to you both." With a nod and a gruff, "Thank you," Mr. Garrett left the shop. Elowyn leaned against the counter, letting out a long breath. Even the most unexpected encounters had gone better than she could have hoped. As she locked up the shop and headed to her car, Elowyn felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears, stepped into the world as her true self, and found acceptance and support from her community. The ruffled blouse, once a symbol of her hidden desires, now felt like armor, a visible representation of her courage and authenticity. Driving home, Elowyn's mind wandered to the future. There would be more challenges ahead, more people to tell, more adjustments to make. But, for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. The weight of hiding, of pretending to be someone she wasn't, had lifted. In its place was a lightness, a joy that seemed to radiate from within. As she pulled into her driveway, Elowyn caught sight of her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watering her rose bushes. The elderly woman waved, calling out, Your flowers are looking beautiful this year. Elowen smiled and waved back. Thank you. I'll bring you some cuttings soon. She stepped out of her car, no longer feeling the need to hurry inside and hide. Instead, she walked over to the fence separating their yards. Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled as she took in Elowen's appearance. You look different today. Happy. It suits you. Elowen's smile widened.
I feel different. Good different.
They chatted for a few minutes about gardening and the weather, the conversation flowing as naturally as it always had. As Elowen bid Mrs. Chen good night and turned towards her house, she felt a surge of gratitude for the simple, everyday interactions that made up the fabric of her life. Inside her home, Elowen kicked off her shoes and made her way to the kitchen. As she prepared a light dinner, she found herself humming again, a melody she couldn't quite place, but that seemed to capture the joy bubbling up inside her. After eating, Elowen settled onto her couch with a cup of tea, her phone in hand. She knew there were calls to make, messages to send. It was time to share her truth with those who weren't part of her daily life in town. Her finger hovered over her parents' number in her contacts. This would be the hardest call, but also the most important. Taking a deep breath, Elowen pressed the call button.
Hello?
Her mother's voice came through the speaker, warm and familiar. Hi, Mom, Elowen said, her voice trembling slightly. Do you have a few minutes to talk? There's something important I need to tell you and Dad. As Elowen began to explain, her voice growing stronger with each word, she felt a sense of coming home, not just to her true self, but to the unconditional love of her family. There were questions, moments of confusion, but underlying it all was acceptance and support. By the time she hung up the phone, tears were streaming down Elowen's face. Not tears of sadness or fear, but of relief and overwhelming love. She had taken the final step in embracing her identity, sharing it with those who had known her longest. Wiping her eyes, Elowen stood and walked to her bedroom. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror, still wearing the ruffled blouse that had marked the beginning of this transformative day. She smiled at her reflection, recognizing the woman she had always been inside. The blouse was more than just an article of clothing. It was a promise to herself, a declaration of authenticity. As she changed into her pajamas, carefully hanging up the blouse, Elowen made a silent vow. This was just the beginning. She would face each day with the same courage she had shown today, continuing to grow and bloom, just like the flowers she so lovingly tended. Crawling into bed, Elowen felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, but for now, she allowed herself to bask in the glow of self-acceptance and the love of her community. As she drifted off to sleep, Elowen's last thoughts were of the flower shop. In her mind's eye, she saw herself standing amidst a sea of blooms, wearing her ruffled blouse, a smile on her face. It was an image of harmony, of inner truth aligning with outer expression. In that moment, on the cusp of sleep, Elowen knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world. Not as someone new, but as the person she had always been, finally free to grow and thrive in the light of day. The soft glow of dawn filtered through the curtains, gently rousing Elowen from her slumber. For a moment, she lay still, savoring the warmth of her blankets and the lingering remnants of a peaceful dream. Then, with a sudden rush of awareness, she remembered. Yesterday hadn't been a dream. She had taken that monumental step, presenting herself to the world as she truly was. A smile spread across her face as she stretched, feeling a lightness in her body that hadn't been there before. As Elowyn went through her morning routine, she found herself pausing frequently, caught off guard by her own reflection. The woman in the mirror smiled back at her, eyes bright with newfound confidence. She took extra care with her appearance today, relishing the freedom to express herself fully. Stepping into her closet, Elowyn's hand instinctively reached for the ruffled blouse she had worn yesterday. But she hesitated, her fingers brushing against the other feminine clothes she had slowly acquired over the years, hidden away until now. Today was a new day, a chance to explore another facet of her style. She settled on a flowing floral dress, its soft fabric draping elegantly over her figure. As she smoothed the material, Elowyn marveled at how natural it felt, how right. This was no costume, no disguise. This was her. The drive to the flower shop felt different today. Yesterday's nerves had been replaced by a quiet excitement. Elowyn found herself noticing details she had overlooked before. The way the morning light caught the dewy grass, the cheerful nods of neighbors out for their morning walks, the vibrant colors of the world around her. It was as if embracing her true self had sharpened her senses, allowing her to fully engage with the beauty of life. As she unlocked the shop door, Elowyn was struck by a sudden idea. She had always arranged the window display with an eye for color and composition, but today she felt inspired to do something more. Carefully selecting blooms from her inventory, Elowyn began to craft an arrangement that spoke to her journey. Delicate orchids, symbolizing beauty and strength, sunflowers for joy and new beginnings, irises representing faith and hope, and at the center, a single, perfect rose, a testament to love, both for oneself and others. As she worked, Elowyn lost herself in the creative process. The familiar act of arranging flowers took on new meaning, each stem placed with intention and care. When she stepped back to survey her work, she felt a surge of pride. The display was more than just a beautiful arrangement. It was a statement, a celebration of authenticity and growth. The bell chimed, signaling the arrival of her first customer. Elowyn turned, a welcoming smile on her face, to see Marina from the bakery. "Wow, Elle!" Marina exclaimed, her eyes wide as she took in both the window display and Elowyn's appearance. "You look amazing, and that arrangement, it's breathtaking!" Elowyn felt a blush creep up her cheeks.
Thank you. I was feeling inspired this morning.
Marina stepped closer, examining the flowers with appreciation. It shows there's something different about it, something powerful. As they chatted, Elowyn found herself opening up about the symbolism behind the arrangement, sharing bits of her journey with her friend. Marina listened intently, her eyes shining with empathy and support. "You know," Marina said thoughtfully, "I've always loved your work, but there's something special about this. It's like you've unlocked a new level of creativity by being true to yourself." Elowyn nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "It feels that way, like everything is clearer, more vibrant." Marina squeezed her hand. "Hold on to that feeling, and remember, you've got a whole community here rooting for you." As Marina left with her usual order of flowers, Elowyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her flower shop had always been a source of joy, but now it felt like more than just a business. It was a canvas for self-expression, a place where she could share her journey through the language of flowers, Throughout the day, Elowyn found herself engaging with customers in a new way. She shared the stories behind certain arrangements, spoke about the symbolism of different blooms. Her passion, always evident, now seemed to radiate from her, drawing people in. Several regulars commented on the change, noting her increased confidence and the extra spark in her designs. Each positive interaction bolstered Elowyn's spirits, reinforcing her decision to live authentically. As the afternoon wore on, Elowyn received a text from her parents. They were planning to visit the following weekend, wanting to see her in person and show their support. The message brought tears to her eyes, happy tears that spoke of relief and love. Just before closing time, the bell chimed once more. Elowyn looked up to see a young woman she didn't recognize, probably in her early 20s, hovering uncertainly near the door.
"Can I help you?"
Elowyn asked warmly. The young woman stepped forward, her eyes darting around the shop. I hope so. I need some flowers for my girlfriend. It's our anniversary and I want it to be special." Elowyn smiled, remembering her own nervous excitement in the early days of realizing and accepting her identity. "Of course. Do you know her favorite flowers?" As they discussed options, Elowyn gently drew the young woman out, learning about her relationship and the message she wanted to convey through the flowers. There was something in the way the customer spoke, a hint of a deeper struggle that Elowyn recognized all too well. As she wrapped up the carefully chosen bouquet, Elowyn hesitated for a moment before speaking.
"You know, flowers have been used to communicate feelings for centuries. Each bloom has its own message."
The young woman nodded, her eyes curious. Elowyn continued, her voice soft.
"But the most important message is the one we send by being true to ourselves. It's the most beautiful gift we can give to those we love."
Understanding dawned in the customer's eyes, and she gave Elowyn a grateful smile. "Thank you. Not just for the flowers, but for everything." As the young woman left, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline, Elowyn felt a profound sense of connection. She had always loved helping people express their feelings through flowers, but now she realized she could offer something more: understanding, empathy, and silent support for those on their own journeys of self-discovery. Closing up the shop that evening, Elowyn took one last look at the window display she had created that morning. In the fading light, the flowers seemed to glow, each petal a testament to growth and transformation. On her way home, Elowyn decided to take a detour through the park. The early evening air was crisp and invigorating, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. As she walked along the winding path, she found herself reflecting on the past 2 days. The journey to this point had been long and often difficult. There had been years of confusion, of trying to fit into a mold that never quite felt right. Moments of fear and doubt that had kept her from fully embracing who she was. But now, walking through the park in her flowing dress, feeling the gentle breeze against her skin, Elowyn knew she had made the right choice. She paused by a small pond, watching the ripples created by a family of ducks gliding across the surface. The scene reminded her of the ripple effect her own transformation was having, not just on her life, but on those around her. The supportive smiles from customers, the heartfelt conversations with friends, even the grateful look in that young woman's eyes. All of these were ripples spreading outward from her decision to live authentically. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Elowyn made her way home. she felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be. That night, as she prepared for bed, Elowyn caught sight of herself in the mirror once again. The woman looking back at her was familiar yet new, her features softened by happiness, her posture more relaxed and confident. She smiled at her reflection, feeling a surge of love and acceptance for every part of herself. Crawling into bed, Elowyn reached for her phone, intending to set her alarm for the morning. Instead, she found herself opening her photo gallery, scrolling back through the years. She paused on a picture from long ago, a young person with short hair and ill-fitting clothes, smiling awkwardly at the camera. The discomfort was evident in every line of the body, in the forced expression. Elowyn touched the screen gently, feeling a wave of compassion for her younger self. "We made it," she whispered to the image. "We're home now." As she drifted off to sleep, Elowyn's mind was filled with images of flowers, not just the ones in her shop, but the metaphorical blooms of self-discovery and growth. In her dreams, she saw herself as a garden, constantly evolving, always reaching towards the light. The next morning dawned bright and clear, full of promise. As Elowyn went through her morning routine, she felt a sense of excitement building. Today marked a full week since she had first worn that ruffled blouse to work, a week of living openly as her true self. She chose her outfit carefully, a pair of tailored slacks in a soft green, paired with a silk blouse that shimmered like flower petals in the sunlight. As she applied her makeup, Elowyn marveled at how much more comfortable she had become with these daily rituals. What had once felt foreign now seemed as natural as breathing. At the flower shop, Elowyn threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She had always taken pride in her arrangements, but now each bouquet felt like a personal statement, a celebration of beauty in all its forms. Midway through the morning, the bell chimed, and Elowyn looked up to see Mrs. Holloway entering, leaning heavily on her cane. The elderly woman's face lit up when she saw Elowyn. "My dear," Mrs. Holloway said warmly, "you look more radiant every day. It does my old heart good to see you so happy." Elowyn felt a rush of affection for her long-time customer. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. Your support means more than you know." As she prepared Mrs. Holloway's usual bouquet, Elowyn found herself opening up, sharing more about her journey. Mrs. Holloway listened attentively, her wise eyes twinkling. "You know," Mrs. Holloway said, as Elowyn handed her the flowers, "I've seen a lot of changes in my time, but the most beautiful transformations are always the ones that come from within. You're blooming, my dear, just like your flowers." Elowyn felt tears prick her eyes at the simple, heartfelt words. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing Mrs. Holloway's hand. As the day progressed, Elowyn found herself sharing more of her story with other regular customers. Each conversation, each moment of acceptance and support felt like another step forward on her path. In the quiet moments between customers, Elowyn's mind wandered to the future. She thought about the possibilities that lay ahead, of deepening relationships, of possibly finding love as her authentic self, of continuing to grow her business in new and creative ways. The idea of dating as her true self both excited and terrified her. But for the first time, Elowyn felt hopeful about the prospect of finding a partner who would love her for exactly who she was. As closing time approached, Elowyn began her usual end-of-day routine. But as she swept the floors and tidied the displays, she found herself humming softly, infusing each task with a sense of joy and purpose. Just as she was about to turn the sign to closed, the bell chimed one last time. Elowyn looked up to see Marina from the bakery, along with a small group of other local business owners. "Surprise!" Marina called out, her arms full of boxes from her bakery. The others carried bottles of sparkling cider and small gifts. Elowyn felt her heart swell with emotion as her friends crowded into the shop, their faces beaming with warmth and support. "We wanted to celebrate you," Marina explained, setting down the boxes of pastries, "to show you how proud we are of your courage and how much you mean to this community." As they shared cider and sweets, surrounded by the fragrant blooms of the flower shop, Elowyn felt overwhelmed by the love and acceptance radiating from her friends. Each person had a kind word to share, a story of how Elowyn's journey had inspired them in some way. Mr. Garrett, the gruff hardware store owner, cleared his throat awkwardly before speaking. "I'm not good with words," he began, "but I want you to know that you've taught this old dog something about bravery. Thank you for that." Elowyn found herself laughing and crying in equal measure, surrounded by the warmth of her chosen family. As the impromptu celebration wound down and her friends began to leave, each offering a hug or a supportive squeeze of her hand, Elowyn felt a profound sense of belonging. After the last guest had gone and she had locked up the shop, Elowyn stood for a moment in the quiet space, surrounded by the gentle presence of her beloved flowers. She thought about the long journey that had brought her to this point, the years of hiding, of fear, of longing to be seen for who she truly was. And now, here she stood, in the heart of a community that had embraced her, in a body that finally felt like home. The path ahead might not always be easy, but Elowyn knew she had the strength to face whatever challenges came her way. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Elowyn's gaze fell on the window display she had created at the beginning of the week. The flowers were still vibrant, their message of hope and transformation as powerful as ever. In that moment, Elowyn made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to grow, to bloom, to share her authentic self with the world. And in doing so, she would create a space where others could feel safe to do the same. Stepping out into the cool evening air, Elowyn took a deep breath, feeling the future unfurl before her like the petals of a flower reaching for the sun. She was Elowyn, florist and friend, daughter and community member. And for the first time in her life, she was completely, unequivocally herself. As she walked to her car, the street lamps flickering to life around her, Elowyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey of self-discovery and acceptance was ongoing, but she knew now that she had the strength and support to face whatever lay ahead. With one last glance at her beloved flower shop, Elowyn smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, new opportunities to grow and share her authentic self with the world. And she was ready, eager even, to embrace each moment with open arms and an open heart.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!